Hello, and thank you for joining us on Scottish Business Week. I'm Danny Gallagher from Business Gateway. With me today is Poonam Gupta of PG Paper. Poonam is a leading UK entrepreneur and CEO of one of Scotland's most successful export businesses. This global success story started life from your kitchen table almost 20 years ago with only £1,000. Now, I hope I haven't given away too much of the backstory. The business has gone from strength to strength over the years, and you're now one of the most recognized entrepreneurs in the UK and beyond. So the company now has a turnover of in excess of 60 million, which is incredible, operates in 60 countries. Offices in India and the US, China, Sweden, Turkey, and still growing. So an incredible story with a career-long interest in strengthening and enabling greater collaboration between Scotland and India. You've also led a successful Scottish Chambers task force to India in 2019. And you've been recognised as one of the 100 most influential in the UK-India relations and are currently chair of the UK-India Manufacturing Council, the FICCI, the largest and oldest apex business organisation in India. Poonam, do you ever sleep? That is the question. So thanks for joining us on Scottish Business Week, and great to meet you. So we all want to know the ins and outs of you and your business, because we know as Business Gateway, many businesses are always keen to hear what other business owners are up to. It makes them think about their own business and some of the ideas they can implement. So we'd just love to hear how you got to where you are today. We're going to start with a couple of serious questions, which I think we probably should cover, just to get your thoughts initially. It's a challenging time for startup businesses at the best of times, but in the current economic climate, even more so. So let's talk about what made you start.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you for a very nice introduction. I am actually born and brought up in India. So I did most of my life, I did my schooling, my university in India. And I came from a very conservative family. When I say conservative, there was a set pattern that women were supposed to follow in India, which is fair enough, get educated up to maximum graduation, and then get married and look after your home, your husband and your children. And somehow, maybe just growing up, noticing the society around me, I didn't want to follow the same stereotype. I wanted more from life. And having married my husband, who is born and brought up here, born in Ireland, and then he's based in Scotland since the age of 7, I came to Scotland in 2002. I arrived in Greenock, the west of Scotland, so from very sunny Delhi to very sunny west of Scotland. And when I came over, unfortunately, I was almost immediately presented with a set of personal challenges, which made me go back to India. And then I came back again after a month. So I couldn't settle. It wasn't like that I came and I just settled straight away here. And whatever personal stuff I was dealing with kind of left me, in a very, not a very good emotional state of mind mentally. I was very disturbed. And I realized that, the only way perhaps to overcome whatever I was going through was connecting with the wider world and, getting out. I didn't know anybody when I came here. So I started looking for a job, and I am a graduate in economics from one of the finest institutes in India. And then I did my MBA in international business and marketing. And despite that, I couldn't find a job. So then, rather than wasting time, I tried looking for voluntary roles in any organizations, perhaps where they didn't have to pay me, just to connect with people. That was the idea at that time. And I got lucky. I got a job with a chartered accountancy firm in Greenock in their tax department, where I worked for 2 months. But what that did for me was I heard all these, things about VAT and taxation and personal allowance, a lot of things, which kind of made me thinking. I could kind of connect the dots and work out perhaps a little bit about the business landscape in Scotland or the regulations, the requirements. Having finished that, I actually went in and with the help of a friend and my husband, I started a locum agency where I was placing pharmacists in the NHS. That business was doing very well, which I think, if I remember correctly, I must have started in November 2022. But my heart was always in international business. That's what I wanted to do. I was always curious about other cultures. I was fascinated with the idea of traveling even as a child. So I started exploring at the time the trends. And somehow everybody was talking about recycling at the time. I don't remember 20 years ago, if you remember that, there was lots of talk about waste and recycling and how are we going to tackle this waste. And I started my research in that area. That took me 10 months. 10 months I was researching, making a lot of cold calls, and you can almost say expanding my knowledge base and understanding what was going on. And then I realized that there was possibly a potential where I could take products from Europe and USA and export them to India. My obvious connection with India was there. And I realized that a lot of manufacturers in Europe and USA were sending a lot of stuff into landfill. And only if I could convince them that rather than sending your products into landfill or burning them, can I please have them and I'll repurpose them, or I'll find use of them in another market, which is not, your market, not your major market. So, your product kind of doesn't compete with your own market. And that took me around 10 months. And that's when, I finally managed to convince a company in Italy to sell me a couple of containers. I think the deal was, I can't remember now, but maybe 27, 28,000 euros at the time, the money that I didn't have. During this time of my research, I was already aware of Business Gateway. So I was taking help from them. I was telling them I want to start a business. And they generously helped me write a business plan and gave me £1,000, which helped me buy my initial computer equipment and a nice table, which I very well set, in the basement of my then house where I used to operate from. And once I convinced the Italians, I didn't have the money to pay for this deal. So I had to do some financial engineering, with the customers I was already speaking to in last 10 months to find a way where they could pay me first and then I could pay for the goods. So I basically created a value proposition which allowed me to raise the money that I needed to pay for these goods. And I kind of took it from there. And that's how my business was born.
So cash flow is king, basically.
Cash flow is always king.
So PG Paper has experienced phenomenal success. That's brilliant news. What do you think has contributed to that success?
Consistency and hard work. If I was to put it into it's never easy to start something. That's the hardest part, actually. Once you start on that journey, you set goals and you set that ambition and you try and find that strategy to how you're going to reach there. If I'd be honest, the first couple of years were simply hard work, lots of good contracts that I delivered. I promised whatever I delivered, I had promised, which allowed me to gain and earn more contracts. Basically, the first couple of years, it was organic growth, I'd say, just simple result of hard work, dedication, delivering on good contracts, delivering on promises that I was giving supplier and customers. But thereafter, it was very obvious that, to grow the business, I would need proper planning strategy in place and perhaps money. Till then, I was just rotating the money the same way I had done my first deal. And I think it was just making sure that I set first the target, made sure how, in the back office that I had, I started slowly recruiting people at that time, are going to cope, with that target, having my systems in place to make sure that, anybody could basically work with me to make sure all my documentation in export Documentation is very important, even till today. So, simple people can churn out complex documentation. So I always made sure my system supported the ambition and the people were brought in to understand the whole goals that we were and how are we going to achieve that. So vision was always set clear. And I think all of those factors contributed to the continuous growth of PG Paper.
So I guess experience comes with significant decisions along the way. I'm wondering what lessons you have learned along the way to get to where you are now.
Oh my goodness, the list of lessons is really long. It is really long. In last 20 years, we have seen so much. If I just pick on like the recession, the financial crisis we saw in 2008, 2009. Then in recent times, there has been Brexit. Then there has been COVID. And, now energy crisis. Every problem teaches you something. Every problem. So the list of lessons learned are very long, but the main lesson which has been learned is whenever you're faced with a problem, focus on finding the solution, not the problem. When we focus on the problem itself, we can get really worked up and we can't think, if you get there because we are very stressed. And stressed, as I read in various places, cuts out the blood supply to your brain. So what is important under challenging times is finding a way to keep your calm. And once you can get hold of yourself, you can get hold of the problem and find the solution for it. And I think if I was to summarize, this is the biggest lesson among many others that I have learned in last 19 years.
So you touched on sustainability earlier on, and so what kind of products we're going to go on and talk just briefly about sustainability, but what products is it that you manufacture? And, in terms of, PG Paper is just a name, but what are the tangible assets?
When you get your Amazon box delivered at home, that box is made of the cardboard. We are supplying packaging solutions to the industry. When you buy, I'm trying to simplify this, the toilet paper you use every day, which became a talking point when COVID actually initially came in. And, at that time, we were supplying essential supplies, because there was shortage of toilet paper. When we talk about pharmaceutical industry, the leaflets that you see in the boxes or the labels that you see on your boxes, that's label paper. We have a huge portfolio of products. Paper is used in industries that a normal person might not be even aware of. For example, even when you're building an aircraft, certain types of papers are used for flooring and insulation. So we have a really wide portfolio of products. And recently, with this change in the mindset of not using single-use plastic, I mean, again, we were way ahead. Before even this change arrived, we are constantly innovating. We were looking at these coffee cups, and I'd sit and look at them. I'm a paper woman, I have to analyze everything I see. And I was like, this cannot be recycled. Because when you if you remember previously there used to be plastic cups and then there came cups that you see in Costa and Starbucks. They have a plastic lining inside, so most of it can be recycled, but not all of it can be recycled. And then there was limited ability to recycle. So when I talk about sustainability in PG paper, we've always kind of stayed way ahead of this changing curve to work out what products the industry might need in the future. And we work with a lot of manufacturers around the world to kind of innovate and test those products and then take them into the market. So for example, about 8 years ago, there was this plastic packaging in India. And we knew that, this packaging is not good for the environment. We went to a manufacturer in Japan and completely came out with a new product with that, which then now almost wholly replaces that packaging in India. And then, the competition followed us as well. So I think sustainability is kind of almost ingrained in the very business model of PG paper and everything else that I do out with.
And just thinking about other businesses then, what can they do to help sustainability, and is it viable going forward for them?
The way the industry is innovating right now, these products, some of them may not be highly viable at the moment, but when you look at consumer products like cups, like your takeaway boxes that you get when from the restaurants, actually we all can do our bit. These products on the grand scale of things in numbers actually at very small cost, to the overall cost of the product. So actually, if the consumer demands and says, I want, I will not take the takeaway in plastic boxes. Why are you not using biodegradable packaging, which is now widely available, and you can see them in various restaurants in Glasgow itself. And the businesses themselves commit to this purpose, which they are. I'm seeing more and more businesses focusing on this whole sustainability, net zero piece, and environmental friendly products. I think that change will come. And as the change will come in volumes and numbers. As the volumes become bigger, the economies of scale will make these products more affordable. And in 5 or 6 years' time, we might turn around and say, as if this is the way life ran, and why should it have been any different before that?
When you mentioned Amazon and deliveries, obviously that market, went skyrocketed during lockdown and during COVID. So for you to keep up with that, how did you find that in terms of the challenge?
Every challenge is actually an opportunity. If you think about it, even every problem, like I said before, teaches you something. So we have an office in China, and we were keeping a close eye back in 2019, you know, 21, yeah, 19 in China to figure out what was going on when things weren't very clear, and having a very close relationship with Far East, countries like Japan, South Korea. We were kind of keeping in the know, and it was only obvious that it was inevitable this time that these lockdowns are going to go worldwide, for example. And when your shops are closed, in the first 3 months, if you remember, there wasn't even any online. I don't think there were many deliveries online because everything was practically shut, except supermarkets and essential supplies. You weren't buying garments and things like that. So at that time, tissue paper for some reason became the biggest challenge. And we adapted very quickly. We have the expertise in import and export. It was a case of finding out supplies and making sure we brought them in faster to ensure that we could supply to wherever they were needed. COVID actually brought so many challenges, and there we are still facing them. Challenges in terms of disruption of supply chain. We are overly dependent. Most countries are overly dependent for basic supplies from country like China. And China was in a lockdown, and that's why there was shortage of materials. There was shortage of consumer products. There was even if you remember, there was time that people were saying food will run out. And it's just about recognizing in a situation, if this is what's happening, and this is how things, supply chain is going to be disrupted, what all is going to be short in supplies and working. I mean, we couldn't do it all, and we didn't want to do it all, because at that time our team was also under a lot of pressure, emotional pressure, mental pressure, the fear of COVID. And it was very important that we supported them mentally. I mean, I've been in the business for 19 years. If I sat doing nothing for 6 months, could we afford it? We could absolutely afford it. At that time, the major focus became, how do we keep our people safe? How do we keep them mentally sane and connected? How do we give them that assurance that they will have jobs, because people were getting laid off. And even though furlough was a scheme announced by the government, still people were losing their jobs. And then bringing our team together, and then making sure that we created a small group of people who were helping bringing the essential supplies from various other countries, not just China. And that's where the 19 years of experience came in handy, and the relationships with 60 countries came in handy. I could call somebody in India and say, I need these products, and you need to ship them fast. I could call somebody in Turkey. I could call somebody in Egypt. I had so many more kind of supplies dotted that I didn't have to depend upon that single point supply from China, which kind of helped to help these supplies which had to go into the market.
Yeah, so that's basically you just had to adapt to the situation. So yeah, challenging with COVID and obviously the current economic crisis. I'm hoping that that will resolve itself quite quickly. So on a more positive side, give us an insight then. How can you foster a culture of innovation within a business as you've done?
Fostering the culture of innovation. I think the most important people, what is the most important factor in a business? I think it's the people. The most important factor in any business is the people who run it. I'm not, a company who's running on robots. I have people. And as far as, I can bring these people along and, we have a shared vision. I have a very big thing in PG, which is, we have shared values, shared vision. We like to connect with each other. I am very open to new ideas. In fact, I encourage new ideas, not just in products as such, but also in processes. I would like to think that I like my team to understand the place they are in and take responsibility for their work. And often they are independent to making their own decisions as considered fit in a situation. And that all comes with that support and confidence we instill in them. That we make them feel safe, that, they are in a safe environment where they are heard and, their work will be appreciated. And all of these mix of a shared vision, shared responsibility at making, and also maybe lead by example. They see me and they see that I'm so passionate about business. I'm also working on many other projects at any given time. I'm there to support them when they need them. I have an open door policy. I know some articles now say you should never have an open door policy. We should have dedicated time. But as much as I have multiple businesses, I still have quite a lean team that I can support. On top of that, my team is supported by, several managers, and those managers are empowered in knowledge, in making decisions, and, again, feeling that safety that and wanting to give their best to the company. And and if that doesn't work out, they know that, they have sitting over them somebody who has 19 years of experience and they can tap into that experience when they're stuck. So I'll always encourage, for example, if somebody comes with a problem, I'll say to them, okay, you've told me the problem. What do you think is the solution? And then I'll sit down with them and work it out. And I might not agree with everything they're saying, but then I'll enhance it. So they own that solution. And I think all of these things are so important, in building a business and in growing that business and making sure that people feel valued and, I feel like I'm taking them with me. And all of that automatically, creates this culture of innovation where people are excited. They want to come to work. They know I'm open to ideas. They know I'm working on multiple projects at any given time. And when we sit down, they want to share those ideas. And I think this whole, fortunately, that culture that we've created, we've learned from our mistakes and had to make a lot of changes. But I think where we are today, we are in a good place where, people come up themselves and say, okay, can we do this like this? Or maybe this is not working. Can we look at it this way? Can we look at this system? And we are listening.
It's quite refreshing to hear you say that one of your greatest assets are your employees. So that's really good for businesses, just to remember that you can't do everything yourself, that you do need support. So I guess what you're saying there is that you're pretty much inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs. We know the public sector has got a number of programs to nurture, support, and motivate. But sometimes I feel that the best people that do motivate our future entrepreneurs are the guys that are business owners themselves. What about your own team? Are there any entrepreneurs on there that you think will go on and do something?
Well, I'll tell you something. Over the years, I have obviously had employees, and also some of them have moved on. And some of my employees that I know have a chain of salons. One of my first employee in the company was actually my neighbor, very bright guy and full of ideas. And now he runs 3 salons. His passion was hairdressing, and he runs 3 salons in west of Scotland. And I feel really proud. And he's always thinking about importing, exporting. once in a while would ask for my opinion of what I think. Then there was another employee, and she now has a series of shops, where she's selling consumer products here. I have had several employees who've come out of PG Paper and gone into other roles, but also businesses. Personally, I feel you were absolutely right when you said it is the entrepreneurs or business people who can motivate the next generation. People often look for examples. People often look for leadership. People often want to connect. Sometimes it's not about if you want to do something, it's about how, that piece. How do I do it? Especially if you don't come from a business background, or you might not have a lot of money in your pocket to start the business, which for example, I didn't have. And when people connect with real life stories, there is that feeling that comes inside. If they can do it, I can do it. I mean, even today, I meet a lot of business people, a lot of inspirational leaders, and I find those little qualities in them which inspire me as well to do bigger and better than I'm doing today. This business and ventures and going into various things is not always a chase for money. It's never a chase for money, in fact. What it is wanting to challenge yourself to see what can you achieve next. I've often found you do something well, the money follows. And that's why the chase is never for money. It's about challenging yourself. It's about developing yourself, whether it's in the space of mental well-being, whether it's in the space of learning how to control your emotions, whether it's in the space of learning some Excel worksheets, some basic stuff, whether it is learning how to implement a new ERP system. It's about, I often say that, it's not about competing with others. You got to be a better version of yourself. I want to wake up. I mean, it's unrealistic to think that I'll wake up every single day, and think, oh, I'm better than yesterday. Sometimes I'm just older than yesterday, you know,
I know how you feel.
or sometimes I'm just more stupid than yesterday. But it's about setting up those short term and long term goals which we want to achieve. So when I started my entrepreneurial journey, it was very lonely. I was in a new country. I didn't know anybody here. I had to learn everything practically by myself. I did get help, thankfully, to some really good organizations like Business Gateway and eventually Scottish Enterprise, which helped me fill in the gaps in my learning. I also basically worked on, tried to do courses, short-term courses, which will help me, fill in those knowledge gaps. But actually, on the whole, it was still quite a lonely journey. I didn't know, any entrepreneurs here. I didn't have a sitting network. I didn't know much about the Chamber of Commerce at that time, for example. Now I know. So I believe that as a business owner, I kind of take it now very personally that I must help people. That people don't need to go through this journey feeling lonely. They don't need to be alone. That, there is a cohort or, a group of individuals which should be able to reach out to each other. That's why I'm a big believer in mentoring. And I'm very proud that many years ago, I was part of this, initial founders of this women business mentoring program, which was started by Chamber of Commerce at that time. I have mentored children as young as 7, 8 years old to, people who are 50, 60-year old. I don't care. Entrepreneurship is not about just the young people. It's not just about the youth. It is about, often you might find when people lose job, it is actually people who are in the senior bracket, even if they have a lot of experience, suddenly they are made redundant. And that might be a decision coming from the fact that the company thinks, oh, we are paying them too much. We can hire somebody at a lower salary who's younger and more energetic. What happens to these people? They have dedicated 20 years of their life working in a corporation. Why can't they, take their life savings that they have built and start a new business? Surely they can. And why should they not be deserving of the same help that, a person of 20 or 23-year-old is deserving of? In fact, it's often harder for the older, age group to learn and to adapt and to get that help. So that's why I'm a big, big believer in mentorship and helping each other and connecting with, whether it's Entrepreneurial Scotland, whether it's Chamber of Commerce, whether the fact that I'm an ambassador of Women Enterprise Scotland, I'm an ambassador of Young Enterprise Scotland, or I am, for example, the chair of FICCI UK India Manufacturing Council. The idea of almost every role that you find me in is something to do is helping connecting people in some way or the other so they can feel supported. It's all about supported, whether it's on local level, national level, or international level.
So we've kind of gone full circle. I don't know where you get the hours in the day to do all these kind of things, but you're hugely inspiring. And it was great to hear your insights today. So many thanks for joining us. Poonam Gupta is the CEO of PG Paper, and I hope you enjoyed the chat. That's it from me, and bye for now.